We're going to talk about zeros of polynomials. What is a zero? Well, you've heard of the number zero. That's not exactly what we're talking about here. It turns out that zero is a specific feature of a polynomial. So here's the definition of a zero. Zero is an x value, something that x equals, when it's an x value when y is equal to 0. So when I have a polynomial and y is equal to 0, what is x? Whatever that is, that's my 0. So what does that look like? Well, let's do a couple problems where we try to find a 0 for some linear functions. Remember, a linear function is a type of polynomial. So linear functions have zeros just like any other polynomial. Let's try to find some. So here we've got a linear function. Y is equal to x plus 3. What's the 0 of that function? Well, remember, a 0 is the x value when y is equal to 0. So here's how we'll find our 0. We're going to make y equal to 0. And we're going to figure out, well, now that y is equal to 0, what's my x value? Well, we've solved these equations before in other math classes. We've only got one variable here. We just need to use some algebra to figure out what the value of it is. So let's subtract both sides by 3. So I've got 0 minus 3. I've got negative 3 over here. Negative 3 equals, I've got x plus 3 minus 3. If I add 3 and then take 3 away, I'm still just left with what I started with. So I found that negative 3 is equal to x. Another way to say that is just x is equal to negative 3. It doesn't matter what order I put it in. So what did I just find? I found out that when y is equal to 0, x has to equal negative 3. What does that mean? That means negative 3 is a 0 of my function. The function y equals x plus 3. Negative 3 is a 0. Can I check to see if that's true? Well, here's how I might do that. So if I put negative 3 in for x, if I make x be negative 3, do you see how negative 3 has replaced where my x was in the equation? If I do that, does that make y equal 0? Well, I've got negative 3 plus a 3. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0, which means that when I put negative 3 in for x, that makes y equal 0. What does that mean? That means that, yes, I really did find the 0 of the function. Negative 3 really is my 0. So I'll box it to say that's my answer. Negative 3 is the 0 of that function. Let's do another function here. I'm going to try to find the 0 of this linear function. Y is equal to 2x minus 1. Well, just like before, to find a 0, I'm going to set y equal to 0 and figure out what does x need to be for that. So I'll just do some algebra to figure out now what x needs to be. Let's add 1 to both sides. Now I've got 0 plus 1 is 1. I've got 2x minus 1 plus 1. Well, that's just 2x. Now I can divide both sides by 2. If I divide both sides by 2, I've got 1/2 is equal to, and these 2's cancel, so this side is really just x. Or I could say x is equal to 1/2. So when I made y be 0, x turned out to be 1/2. That was the x value. That means that 1/2 is a 0 of this function. 1/2 is a 0. Okay. Now that you know how to find zeros of linear functions, now that you know how to find what x needs to be when y is equal to 0, I'm going to let you do a few of your own. So, if we set y equal to 0, what is x? Well, let's add 5 to both sides. And the resulting equation is just 5 is equal to x. Or another way to say that is x is equal to 5. That means when I set y equals 0, when y equals 0, 5 is what x has to be. 5 is the x value, which means 5 is what's called a 0. 5 is a 0 of that function. Try this one. Okay, so when y is equal to 0, what's my x value? Whatever it is going to be my 0. It's going to be the answer. So I set y equal to 0. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. Negative 3 is equal to 2x. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And I've got negative 3 halves is equal to x. Or another way to say that, x is equal to negative 3 halves. Which means that negative 3 halves is the x value that makes y 0. Negative 3 halves is a 0 of my function.